This week, India made a rare personnel matter, taking advantage of the change of the British king, to recover from the British the looted cultural relics during the colonial era. This is actually a traditional program in India. Whenever there is a major event in India, India has to knock on the UK, emphasizing the historical responsibility of the British with a victim attitude, and by the way, creating a progressive attitude for itself to stand out for the vast number of late developing countries. Indians have their own little 99, but many large Western museums, including the UK, have collected a large number of exotic cultural relics, which is indeed a symbolic thing. What is a museum? Museums are at the forefront of cultural struggles, good and evil, and show not only culture, art, the progress of all civilizations, but also the conflicts of all civilizations. This conflict is both external and internal. In the past, Western museums would show off their third world trophies as a way to demonstrate the strength of their own civilization. And in recent years, it seems to be responding to the decline of Western civilization. From time to time, these Western museums will break out some extremely low-level major cultural relics accidents, giving foreigners a little shock from the West. For example, at the beginning of the month, in order to pursue the exhibition effect, the Minneapolis Museum of Art in the United States chose to exhibit naked without protection, so it smashed the famous Shang Dynasty bronze owl statue. Known for its cuteness, this bronze owl statue has always been very popular at home and abroad. It was sold abroad by Lu Qinzai, a notorious cultural relic dealer in the Republic of China. In the eyes of the Chinese, this is a treasure of ancient times, a regret of modern times, and a common carrier of the glory and suffering of a nation. But from the perspective of the West, this is a collection they bought with money, and the money and goods have already been paid off. No matter how precious Oriental cultural relics are, their essence is also a prop to attract popularity and highlight the heritage of the museum. Since it is a prop, it is naturally used. In order to show the effect, it is only natural to take some risks. Like Shi Chong, Wan Kai values coral trees as much, and usually takes care of them. But it will not prevent them from showing off their wealth by smashing treasure trees when showing off. When the hegemony rises, the museums of the great powers collect all kinds of spoils from foreign lands, which is a manifestation of the emerging empire's will to power. From exotic ores, specimens, to cultural relic fragments, it is not only the goodwill and financial resources of the sponsors of the expedition and the wisdom of the participating organizations, but also not just the study of university churches and hospitals. The Great Museum is the triumph of civilization over barbarism, and the truth of democracy is better than ancient times. A symbol of despotism. From the British Museum to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, exotic loot is an integral and fundamental theme, and its narrative has never changed. In the eyes of the Third World, the prosperity of the First World is based on one's own blood and tears, but in the concept of the First World, this is my 5-generation family business, the legacy of my ancestors, and it cannot be coveted by the gangsters. These museums, like the Huangjia Dialo, always emphasize the irreconcilable contradictions between the First World and the Third World, past and present. At a time when this contradiction is far from disappearing and is becoming more and more intense, large Western museums will naturally not be a sanctuary for the common heritage of human civilization as some people claim. This unilateral claim is similar in nature to Indian reservations, and it is humiliating again and again. But it is undeniable that after long years of plundering and the destruction of the remains of the civilization, European and American museums are now filled with the essence of human civilization. These natural and man-made treasures have a captivating fascination. Intellectuals of the Third World, being in it, and looking back at their barren and backward home country, especially when facing non-native cultural relics, often unconsciously become intoxicated, and even empathize with the First World, creating a kind of cultural relics thanks to them. We can experience such a beautiful sense of happiness. This kind of mukyang is the first step to be domesticated. What's more, when faced with the national cultural relics displayed in the First World, some people are so honored, and even have the dream of leaving Asia and entering Europe. This is what we said at the beginning, museums are at the forefront of cultural struggles. The First World Museum and the Third Museum may have similar functions in terms of preservation of cultural relics, but the tasks they undertake and the messages they convey are diametrically opposed and must not be confused. If those plunderers and their descendants can openly display their stolen goods and claim that they can represent all mankind, take pride in this, and demagogue people, then those descendants of those who have been plundered and invaded are also obliged to inherit the misery of its people, the recourse to the inheritance of the ancestors, and the liquidation of crimes. This is the most basic justice in the world, and it is a long struggle in the cultural field. However, in reality, we can easily notice that, at least in the cultural circles of our country, this kind of conflict is not intense. In fact, there seems to be a gap between the cultural elites of our country and ordinary people for a long time. Many cultural elites in our country can't help but be intoxicated by the narrative of Western civilization from time to time, which is the kind of existence that lingers in the British Museum. Almost 20 years ago, it was the time of the journey of popular culture. At that time, there was a question about Dunhuang. When Dunhuang cultural relics were discovered in the late Qing dynasty, there were foreign powers plundering them, and corrupt officials inside them. It is really difficult to preserve it in China, and it is inevitable to go abroad without returning. Therefore, intellectuals put themselves in their shoes, wandering between utilitarianism and conscience, reality and future, feeling powerless, and burst into tears. This crying, on the contrary, cried out the embarrassment of the old Chinese intellectuals for a long time. Western aggression also in fact destroyed the monopoly of the old intellectuals on culture and thought. The Western plunder of cultural relics is still second, and more importantly, for a long time, the culture carried by cultural relics has been regarded as taboo by scholars. Today, these old knowledge are vulnerable to the challenge of the West, completely backward and worthless. This kind of spiritual and material impact has brought about a change unseen in 2,000 years, which of course caused pain to domestic intellectuals. On another scale, both the Qing court and the Republic of China were unusable, not enough to resist foreign humiliation. Intellectuals can be salty and reformed, but they actually reject the revolution represented by New China, which broadly unites the middle and lower classes. Because whether it is socialism or industrial construction, they are breaking the limitation of knowledge and making culture go downward. This is to fundamentally break the monopoly on culture, to dig up the graves of the ancestors and cut off the food for the descendants. Including museums, science popularization, culture, and art, which are traditionally exclusive to cultural elites, should be gradually transferred to ordinary people, and the general public should be guided to understand the mysteries and fun of them. But leaving these fields, where should those old-fashioned intellectuals live? The status of the old-fashioned cultural elite comes from the monopoly of traditional culture. In the socialist revolution represented by New China, the relationship between them and ordinary people is reversed. Alien invasions make everything they own meaningless, just like what the American colonists did to the Maya and Indians. This basic survival crisis is of course terrible. Therefore, old intellectuals with a little bit of conscience will also passively participate in national salvation. But with the victory of new democracy, this danger has disappeared. Since the founding of New China, the contradiction between the old-fashioned cultural elite and the masses has emerged. Just because of the elimination of the existential crisis, the existence of New China has given some conservative cultural people a kind of leeway to be clean. The foreign aggressors who were originally enemies have instead become a kind of natural ally. Before they knew it, their main focus was on the inside. In fact, the continuous development of Chinese society is gradually crowding out these old-style intellectuals. The more successful China's modernization and industrialization become, the less they adapt. Because the cultural class refuses to hand over cultural dominance and refuses to be compatible with downwards, it naturally does not have the ability to make progress together with society, and it is difficult to realize self-modernization. They do not have the ability to modernize themselves, and the means they use to resist modernization can only be to rely on the powerful West to maintain a backwardness by relying on a set of modern expressions provided by foreigners. And this kind of dependence on foreign countries for false progress and true backwardness is also welcomed by the West. Similar to the end of the 20th century, including the big historical background like the Dunhuang question, Hong Kong, Taiwan, even Japan, South Korea, and Singapore were in a strong economic position at that time, and they had an ambition to fight for orthodoxy, trying to present themselves as preserving the essence of Chinese culture, and adapted to the modern Chinese world orthodoxy. As a result, it strengthens its right to speak on China issues, and even uses it as a tool for interference and even subversion in China. It is ironic that a historical period of unprecedented catastrophe for Chinese cultural relics happened precisely in the 1980s and 1990s. Due to the strong demand for cultural relics in the West, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and other places, the combination of modern technology and abundant manpower has resulted in unprecedented large-scale excavation, large-scale harvesting, and large-scale sales of traditional antiquities, to precious animal and plant samples. Its depth and breadth, the devastation caused was unprecedented in all ages. This undoubtedly proves once again that the suffering of backward countries comes from the plunder of the First World. But in this period, facing the catastrophe, many intellectuals no longer held the attitude of crying from done, but shook their waists and tried to get closer to the initiator of the suffering. Under huge external pressure and social turmoil, they wavered in joy, consciously or unconsciously acting as advocates for foreign forces. The so-called complex of the Republic of China and the complex of masters that many intellectuals have so strongly arose in such a historical period. Chen Danking, the Republic of China wants to do two things, one is to strengthen the country, and the other is to build people. In the matter of a strong country, the Republic of China is ashamed to see the Republic. It is incomparable to satellites and nuclear weapons. But in terms of Loren, I believe that the people of the Republic until today are still very ashamed to see the Republic of China. In terms of being upright, we have no right to say that we are all slaves in front of the people of the Republic of China. I saw them all as slaves in all universities. Of course, I am a senior slave. This is completely incomprehensible to the people of the Republic of China. On the one hand, they are in an embarrassing position where they live in the East and live in the West, and they have dreams in their hearts of the First World, which will give them a hand and give them many honors and benefits. But on the one hand, the smart ones among them quickly realize that their value lies in their ability to act as an agent in the country. If they really want to go to appreciate the West, they will lose their foundation, that is, lose their value. And like the Republic of China, being able to travel between the East and the West with ease, and to hold on to the foreign self with ease, has naturally become the dream of some people. The freedom granted by the Republic of China is not academic freedom, but actually the freedom to prostitute oneself. The complex of the Republic of China and the psychology of Mukyang are actually two sides of the same coin of these cultural elites. A typical example of this is Chen Danking's praise of the Republic of China and his experience in the United States. Therefore, they are actually unable to make a cut with China, and their mission is to hold on to an acre of land, wandering between the inside and outside, trying to prevent the cultural front from falling into the hands of the general public. At the same time, Western society is increasingly showing isolation between the upper elite and the lower masses. Cultural creation and the exchange of interests among elites are deeply bound, completely separated from the sky-high priced artworks of the public, showing how cultural people can achieve both fame and fortune without too much effort by acting as fans. This new routine, which breaks away from production and creation and can bring huge benefits simply by monopolizing the power of cultural interpretation, undoubtedly has great appeal to many cultural people of that era. On the contrary, they abhor the social equality and common progress represented by socialism in the narrative of the new China Revolution, and find it difficult to keep up with the technological innovation and progress constantly demanded by a rising society. Therefore, in the field of science popularization such as domestic museums, our country's culture often do not care about dissemination in the public domain, and in fact they are unable to do what they want. Instead, they were enthusiastic about what they called cultural enlightenment. However, with their ability, they cannot organize and adapt to modern theories and languages, so they can only borrow Western words. When Western words gradually disappear with the decline of the West, they can only rely on simple grouping and try to control culture, especially the power of interpretation and control of traditional culture maintains its monopoly position through internal reproduction, and loses its basic progressiveness. The field of humanities science popularization represented by museums is a typical symbol of industrialized society and a cultural window to the public. While fighting externally, it also undertakes the mission of mobilizing internally. Obviously, in this field, we have not done enough of both kinds of work. My country is of course a more successful modern country than India, but the transition from old to new in the cultural field lags behind social development for a long time, so that it has seriously affected the development of the country's cultural industry and even caused social tearing. In such a historical period of changing social environment, distance and cultural iteration, the monopoly of the old intellectuals on the cultural field should come to an end. With the all-round development of Chinese society, compared with the poor and blank at the beginning of the founding of the People's Republic of China, the level of education and cultural cognition of the whole society has now undergone earth-shaking changes. Like all industrialized societies, we have long since escaped the state of scarcity, and are more troubled by which of the dazzling new things are more valuable. The domestic cultural industry increasingly shows the vigorous vitality of the people and the stagnation of the old system. The cultural value possessed by the old intellectuals has disappeared, and it has become an obstacle to the development of culture in the new era. With their own corrosion, they have become a being for the sake of being. They no longer have the ability of self-renewal, or even the ability of inheritance, but only in the fields monopolized by constant rust and suffocation. Under the impact of the times, it is time for such a large antique to be sent to the Museum of History, and it cannot be expected to play any role anymore. Only by getting rid of the remnants of the old age can we open up the way for the successors of the new era, so as to carry forward the past and open up the future, carry forward and build the Chinese culture of the new era. Senior U.S. officials fled the White House one after another. Kerry told the truth, wondering if Biden's trip can last until the end of the year. According to Russian media reports, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova stated that officials of the Biden administration are fleeing the White House. The escape mentioned here is literally, more and more senior U.S. officials have escaped from the White House. The explanation given by American experts is that they do not trust the federal government and Biden himself. Zakharova named a few names, such as the Deputy National Security Advisor to the U.S. President. This person is known as the designer of anti-Russian sanctions. But there was a sudden desire to rest. In addition, Cedric Richmond, a senior advisor to the White House's public liaison office, resigned, and Gina McCarthy, a senior advisor to Biden on climate, plans to leave the White House. It was previously reported that White House spokesman Bodhisattva has also found a new home and is expected to leave the White House in May. Senior U.S. officials fled the White House one after another. Zakharova named a few names, such as Dalip Singh, the Deputy National Security Advisor to the U.S. President. This person is known as the designer of anti-Russian sanctions. But there was a sudden desire to rest. In addition, Cedric Richmond, a senior advisor to the White House's public liaison office, resigned, and Gina McCarthy, a senior advisor to Biden on climate, plans to leave the White House. It was previously reported that White House spokesman Bodhisattva has also found a new home and is expected to leave the White House in May. In addition to people around Biden, there has also been a large-scale exodus of personnel from the team of U.S. Vice President Harris. The matter began before the Russia-Ukraine conflict because of dissatisfaction with Harris. In fact, you can know the situation of Biden and Harris by looking at the approval rate. Biden's approval rate has been maintained at around 40%. Basically, apart from the previous U.S. president, no U.S. president can get Biden's share. Looking at Harris again, the approval rating is even worse than Biden, and it has always been very bad. It can be called the worst vice president in American history, not even one. The White House team is centered on Biden and Harris. Now that the two leaders are worse than the other, it makes sense for people around them to leave one after another. After all, the politicians in the United States are all for their own benefit. The boss is unreliable. According to Zakharova, the U.S. media said that Kerry, the U.S. President's special envoy on climate issues, is considering whether this ship will carry until the end of the year. Kerry is also an old man in the Democratic Party. He once ran for president against Bush Jr. and served as the Secretary of State of the United States. Such a senior politician has also begun to think about how long the Biden ship can sail, which shows how serious the problem is. Kerry is a person with a good past record and a detached position in the Democratic Party. Being able to come back and help Biden is already a face for Biden, but if you think that Biden is too bad and overturned, Kerry's comeback became a dog-tailed mink. It will have a considerable impact on its personal reputation. Kerry's current position sounds ordinary, but it is actually not ordinary. He is a member of the White House National Security Council and is directly responsible to Biden. Therefore, not to mention other people who fled the White House, just talking about Kerry's current concerns about the Biden administration is very telling. The end of this year is the midterm election, which will affect the internal situation of the United States in the next 2 years. Biden has been preparing for this election since he took office, but the situation is getting worse and worse. Even though the war has been provoked, his approval rate still has not improved. Judging from the current situation alone, Biden has nothing to do. Especially with only half a year left, it is difficult for Biden to reverse the situation. Once both houses of Congress fall into the hands of the Republican Party, to be honest, it will be very detrimental to these people around Biden. Since there is no hope in the midterm elections, it is better to make plans early. Huawei held a new product launch event and officially launched a new generation of Mate 50 series flagships. The brand new Huawei Mate 50 series provides 4 models: Mate 50, Mate 50 Pro, Mate 50R Sports design, and Mate 50E, and brings a variety of new flagship level support. According to official news, the new flagship product Huawei Mate 50 series supports Baidu satellite information hardware capabilities, and is the industry's first mass smartphone that supports Baidu satellite information. When you are in an environment without ground network signal coverage, such as desert uninhabited land, sea destruction, earthquake rescue, etc., you can send text and location information to the outside through the Changlian app to keep in touch with the outside world, and support multiple locations to generate trajectory maps. However, with the official release of the Mate 50 series, many users have begun to pay attention to more details of this new feature. At present, Huawei has also given an official introduction about these contents. It is reported that the Baidu satellite message function of Huawei Mate 50 series does not need to insert a SIM card, and can communicate externally through the satellite network in an environment without ground network signal coverage. When the mobile phone has no signal, no cellular network/WLAN network coverage, and is in an open and unobstructed environment, you can send messages through the Baidu satellite in the Baidu satellite message service account in the Changlian app. However, satellite communication only supports sending satellite messages in Changlian app, and does not support internet/call/video functions for the time being. During the public testing period, the monthly quota is free to use, and the sending will not continue when the quota is used up. It should be noted that the receiver can only receive Baidu satellite messages in an environment with ground network coverage. If the mobile phone at the receiving end has installed and activated the Changlian app version that supports Baidu satellite news, you can receive Changlian messages and SMS messages at the same time. If the Changlian app is not installed on the receiving mobile phone, you can only receive SMS messages. As for the specific function support models, Huawei officially stated that currently only Huawei Mate 50, Mate 50 Pro, and Mate 50R Sports design support sending messages through the Baidu satellite network, and do not currently support receiving messages through the Baidu satellite network. However, at the same time, a few days ago, Russian Minister of Education Kravtsov announced that the existing textbooks will be rewritten in 2024. In a war, Russia exposed many problems and made Russia understand many problems. There is a war in the front, but there are many people in the rear who are fiercely opposing the war, and only against Russia, not against the West, which has pushed Russia into the danger of war. In order to deal with this problem, Russia has paid a lot of energy. This is an ideological struggle. Western countries used ideological weapons to disintegrate the former Soviet Union without a single soldier. On the relics of the former Soviet Union, there are still a large number of believers in Western values, that threaten the foundation of Russia. In peacetime, there is nothing wrong with each other, but once the war breaks out, the two different values turn into an incompatible contradiction between ourselves and the enemy. The existence of society determines the consciousness of society, and what is conscious reacts to social existence. Chairman Mao has a deep understanding of the reaction of consciousness. He said at the 10th plenary session of the 8th Central Committee held on September 24, 1962. Whenever a regime is to be overthrown, public opinion must first be formed, and ideological work must be carried out first. It doesn't matter whether it is revolution or counter-revolution. Ideological work is so important, so Chairman Mao devoted a lot of energy to thinking about this issue. He said, the proletariat must transform the world according to its own world outlook, and the bourgeoisie must also transform the world according to its own world outlook. In this respect, the question of who will win between socialism and capitalism has not really been resolved. If you don't understand the situation enough, or don't understand it at all, you will make a huge mistake. He also said, there are two kinds of things growing in the fields, one is called food, and the other is called weeds. Farmers need to fight against the weeds in the fields every year, and our party's writers, artists, critics, and professors also need to fight against the weeds every year. Fight the weeds in the field of thought. There are two aspects to socialist transformation. One is the transformation of the system, and the other is the transformation of people. The system is not only ownership, but also a superstructure, mainly government organs and ideology. All ideologies are to reflect class relational. For example, newspapers, which belong to the scope of ideology, school education, literature, and art, are also an ideology, a superstructure. In the process of socialist construction, Chairman Mao was keenly aware of ideological issues, and did a lot of construction and preventive work, so he did not make a huge mistake. The Soviet Union was different. They announced the elimination of classes early, ideological struggles also disappeared, and as a result, they were defeated in the ideological field. The satellite was launched into the sky, the red flag fell to the ground, and a red empire collapsed in an instant. The former Soviet Union was the hardest hit area for the failure of ideological work. It not only ruined the Soviet Union and the world's socialist trend of thought, but also sowed disaster, pain, and war on the territory of the former Soviet Union. Ukraine and Russia are fighting to the death today. Its root is not a continuation of ideological struggle. Seeing Zelensky spare no effort to remove the traces of the former Soviet Union, you can understand how thoroughly the ideological work of the former Soviet Union failed. A war against Russia. Although it is a bit late, it is also a remedial attitude to remedy the situation. Russia was blunt when explaining the reasons for the rewriting of textbooks. The existing Russian sociology textbooks, infiltrated by Western ideas, are promoting liberalism and pseudo-liberalism, which are not in line with the real and lasting values of Russian society. As Chairman Mao said, school education, literature, and art are also an ideology. The Russians found the root of the problem and took action. They don't want poisonous teaching materials to continue to harm the next generation of Russia. For the Russian nation, it is a good thing. McCarthy just said that the United States is far from reaching the debt ceiling. Meanwhile, managing $793 billion in PGIM bets that the tragedies of 2011 will be repeated. The Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives McCarthy told Republican lawmakers that the United States is still far from reaching a debt ceiling agreement. He told Biden that there will be no clear debt ceiling, no tax increases, and spending must be reduced. McCarthy also urged Republicans to remain united, saying, "We're getting closer every day to a deal on the debt ceiling, and we have to get a deal." U.S. Republican Congressman Hearn also revealed that McCarthy told lawmakers to stay at the scene within 24 hours. Asset management giants bet on default. And as U.S. politicians hold talks to avert a historic debt default, PGIM Fixed Income has spotted an opportunity to bet on the next crisis. 800 billion asset management giants bet, the U.S. debt crisis broke out again in 2011. U.S. Republican Congressman Hearn also revealed that McCarthy told lawmakers to stay at the scene within 24 hours. Asset management giants bet on default. And as U.S. politicians hold talks to avert a historic debt default, PGIM Fixed Income has spotted an opportunity to bet on the next crisis. The firm's co-chief investment officer, Greg Peters, bought long-dated credit default swaps, a form of insurance against future defaults, on the assumption that the U.S. would once again find itself in a similar impasse. These are tough situations for investors to grapple with. Politicians are widely expected to strike a deal soon to raise the debt ceiling, but date X, the point at which the government loses its ability to pay its obligations, is dangerously near. Some investors are betting on short-dated T-bills given the market confusion surrounding a potential X date. But Peters said the bets simply weren't worth it for the funds at his $793 billion PGIM fixed income fund. Instead, he focused on the US CDs curve. The US CDs curve is highly inverted, which means people are paying for default protection in the short term, he said in a telephone interview. "We're a little bit off the curve because we suspect it's going to continue year after year. Congress's damage to Washington, D.C., isn't going away anytime soon." The current standoff is reminiscent of 2011, when the talks culminated in a first downgrade of the U.S. government's credit rating by ratings agency Standard & Poor's, shocking global markets. Traders are getting jittery. The ICE-BOF Move Index, a widely used gauge of bond volatility, has risen this year to levels not seen during the Great Financial Crisis. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said on Monday that it is now highly likely her department will run out of sufficient cash by early June, possibly as soon as June 1st. PGIM has pegged the chance of a default happening this summer at 5%, while that may seem low. Peters, who has worked at the Treasury, said it is nonetheless higher than it should be. "It's a very difficult investment thesis because you have this low probability, high catastrophe outcome, he said. Peters is also wary of the threat of inflation and still thinks the market is pricing in too many rate cuts, even though the rate cuts have started to wane. Federal Reserve official James Bullard said on Monday he supports 2 more rate hikes in 2023 after hawkish comments from his Minneapolis colleague Neil Kashkari. "I still believe that front-end rates in particular will remain above what the market is pricing in," Peters said. "Even if we get into a recession, I think it's already priced in." Today's exchange rate. Text editor, Zhaiqiuyi. Layout editor, QM. Picture design, Yang Xia. Copyright statement, the content of this article comes from Phoenix, Canada. Search for Phoenix, Canada or WeChat ID PCC_168 to follow this official account. The pictures used in this official account are all from the internet, and the copyright belongs to the original owner. If there is any improper use, please contact us in time. Past review. Fed, bad review. The latest survey, Powell is the most untrustworthy Fed chairman, Biden and Yellen are also on the list. Home prices in Greater Vancouver have soared 5%. It will rise in the second half of the year. Want to lie flat? Move to these 5 places in BC. Max out the whole network. Do Xiao, the second generation in Vancouver, marries the most beautiful daughter of the gambling king He Chalian. The island wedding cost $500 million. The Canadian dollar is expected to rise to 0.78 against the US dollar by the end of the year. CPI dropped to 4.3%, and inflation finally fevered, but everything still feels expensive. Split brain budget. RBC tracker, Canadians eat and drink so much that they are willing to spend a lot of money to do these things. Vancouver like the predecessor. Bank of Canada, inflation will slow to 2.5% by the end of the year, but interest rates will remain high for a long time. Buyers in the Greater Vancouver real estate market are about to sell again. The Bank of Canada continues to suspend interest rate hikes and maintains the interest rate at 4.5%, and the US CPI continues to slow down. The latest data, the king of the crane index is in this Canadian city again. 4 times more than the second-ranked city. Heavy. Trump arrested before heading to New York for arraignment. Denies all allegations. The first ex-president in history to be indicted. First, Canada cancels the new crown testing requirement for Chinese tourists. But there are important changes for several flights to China. The sky-high price of returning air tickets can't be bought. The new house in Dawen was snapped up by this group of people. Urban planning experts, levy higher speculation tax to increase housing density. Official announcement, Consulate General, visa application measures have changed. Home flight information update. CIBC predicts that interest rates will not be cut next year. Warning, housing prices may fall back to 2014. Netizens complained, if you can't pay off the mortgage, will the bank buy it? Interest rate cuts in September. Canadian Wall Street predicts, Canada's economy will decline. Central Bank Governor, hee. I can't take it anymore. The hostess was so worried about renewing her mortgage that she couldn't sleep. 45% of Canadians sell their home within 9 months of being unable to repay their mortgage. How slaves are going to fight a protracted war. The loan interest rate of the 6 major banks rose to 6.7%. Authoritative fund forecast, the first interest rate cut is at this time. The house was sold at a low price as soon as it was rented out. Shadow tenants have already targeted these 32 properties, and these 2 types of housing are the hardest hit areas. How slave take a breath. Bank of Canada, 0.25% rate increase today. Implying a pause in rate hikes and a rate cut at the end of 2023. Central Bank Governor, too early to talk about rate cuts? Waiting for interest rates to drop. Real estate investors miss the highest selling point. Borrowing private loans to secure houses, apartment has become the hardest hit area. Angry, tried to enter the second ballroom at gunpoint. God operates. Air Canada actually handles passenger luggage like this. There are 500 lost chests hidden in the warehouse. Buying the property market this year? Economist, it will fall another 25%. The 5 major banks warn, tens of thousands of people may default on their mortgages, and these people are the most dangerous.